Hello, everyone. Today, we will begin to study Chapter 4, the Standard Trade Model. After studying this chapter, we will be able to use the Standard Trade Model to illustrate how trade patterns are decided by supply and demand. We will also be able to understand how terms of trade, tariffs, and subsidy affect trade patterns and welfare of trade nations. Firstly, let's study the Standard Trade Model. We will spend 2 classes on it. Today, we will learn the first part of it. In today's class, we will learn the relationship between production possibility frontier and the relative supply curve, and the relationship between the relative prices and relative demand. After today's class, you will be able to understand the components of the Standard Trade Model, such as production possibilities frontiers as value lines, indifference curve, and learn how to use these tools to illustrate the changes of supply and demand. Firstly, let's look at the relationship between the production possibilities and the relative supply. Let's look at the figure 1. We assume there are 2 countries, and each country produces 2 goods, food and cloth. We use F for food, C for cloth in the figure 1. We also assume each country's production possibility frontier is a smooth curve. We use TT line to illustrate it in the figure 1. But what is production possibility frontier? Production possibility frontier is the graph which indicates all combination of 2 goods a nation can supply when the nation's resources are fixed. The production of one commodity can only be increased by sacrificing the production of the other commodity. Look at figure 1. The production of cloth can only be increased by sacrificing the production of food. So the TT line in this figure concaves to the origin. The production possibility frontier just shows us the production capacity of this nation when the resources are fixed. The actual production which this nation will produce depends on relative price of one product to the other products. In figure 1, the price of cloth relative to food is indicated by PC divided by PF, and the price of food relative to cloth is indicated by PF divided by PC. We need to introduce another concept in the value line. In the value lines is the lines along which the value of 2 goods is constant. In microeconomics, as a value line defines relationship between production of 2 products in which the total market value is constant. The higher market value is, the farther out an isovalue line lies. Each of isovalue is defined by an equation of the form PCQC plus PFQF equal to V, where V is the constant value of output, QC is the output of cloth, QF is the output of food, PC is the price of cloth, PF is the price of food. Look at figure 1. The slope of an isovalue line is PC divided by PF. At a given market price, a market economy will choose production levels that maximize the value of its output, PCQC plus PFQF equal to V. In this figure, the highest value of output is achieved by the producing at point Q. Well, TT line is just a tangent to the highest possible S value line. Now, we will talk about how the change of relative price affects relative supply. Look at figure 2. In the first place, let's look at panel A. The highest ISO value line the economy would reach before the change of relative price of cross to food is shown as VV1. Now, suppose that the relative price of cross to food, PC, divided by PF were to rise. Then, the ISO value lines would be steeper than before. The highest line after the price change is VV2, the point at which the economy produced shifted from Q1 to Q2. That means the supply of cross relative food, QC divided by QF, rises. So, as we expect, a rise in the relative price of cross leads to the economy to produce more cross and less food. Panel B shows the relative supply curve associated with the production possibility frontier, TT. After talking about the supply side of the market, we transfer our analysis to demand side of the market. We will introduce a new concept, indifference curve. An indifference curve represents combination of cross and food that leaves the consumer equally well off. Any combination of cross and food on the same indifference curve means indifferent to the consumers and give the same satisfaction to him. Indifference curve have 3 properties. Let's look at figure 3. The figure is helpful for us to understand the properties. Firstly, indifference curves are downward sloping. In the figure 3, if you consume less food, then you must consume more cross to be equally satisfied. Secondly, the indifference curve that lie farther from the origin make consumers more satisfied because consumers prefer having more of both goods. Thirdly, indifference curve become flatter when they move to the right when the consumers consume more cross and less food. That means with more and more cross being consumed, extra unit of cross becomes less valuable to the consumers. The unit of food the consumers is willing to give up for each unit of cross will decrease. So indifference curve take a shape of convex to the origin. The value of an economy's consumption equals to the value of its production. We can use the equation PCDC plus PFDF equal to PCQC plus PFQF equal to V to reflect it. Here, DC and DF are the consumption of cross and food. QC and QF are the production of cross and food. PC and PF are the prices of cross and food. This equation means the production point and consumption point must align on the same isovalue line. The economy's demand depends on the taste of its consumers. We assume that the economy's consumption decision is based on the taste of a single representative individual. The economy's consumption choices are based on the preference and relative price of goods. As you can see in figure 3, the economy will choose to consume at the point on as the value line that yields the highest possible welfare. This point is where the as the value line is tangent to the highest reachable indifference curve, shown here as point D. Comparing with production point DQ, the economy needed to trade with the other nation to realize this consumption level. So the economy must export crops and import food. Now, let's consider the relationship between the relative price and the demand. Look at figure 4. Panel A shows the effect of increase of relative price. In the panel A, as we discussed, the slope of either value lines is equal to minus the relative price of crops. We use PC divided by PF to indicate it here. As a result, when that relative price of crops rises, as the value lines become steeper, shifting from VV1 to VV2. The economy produces more crops than food, shifting production from Q1 to Q2, and consumption shifting from D1 to D2. Now, let's look at panel B. Panel B shows the effect of rise in the relative price of crops on relative production. As you can see, when the relative price of crops rises, the relative production will be increased from Q1 to Q2. It can be indicated to move from 1 to 2 in the panel B. With the relative price of crops rise, the relative demand will be decreased from D1 to D2. The move from D1 to D2 reflects two effects of the rise of relative price of crops. First, the economy has moved to the higher indifference curve, meaning that it is better off. Look at panel A. You will find with the rise of the relative price of crops, the as value line becomes steeper and the higher indifference curve can be reached. Why? Because the crops is the exported product to this economy. The economy can get more food import at a given amount of the crops with the rise of relative price of crops. Second, the change in relative prices leads to the shift along the indifference curve toward the food and away from crops. With the rise of relative price of crops, crops is more expensive than food. Consumers will prefer to consume more food relative to crops. In the panel B, the decrease from D1 to D2 with the rise of relative price of crops can be indicated in the movement from the 1 comma to 2 comma. Look at figure 4. The relative price of crops to food is determined by the intersection of relative demand and relative supply for that country. If the economy cannot trade, then it produces and consumes at point D3. Well, the indifference curve is tangent to the production possibility frontier in the panel A. In the panel B, the relative price of crops to food is determined by the intersection of relative demand and relative supply for that country. If the economy cannot trade, then it consumes and produces at point 3. That is the end of today's class. Thank you.